What advice would you give to handle nerves while in the courtroom? Does anyone want to jump in on this one?
I'd just say it's experience. It's just you can try all the psychological exercises. One thing is, if you have prepared the brief properly, and if you have done the work properly, and you know you've done that, that will take some of the pressure off. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what other people's experience is, but yeah, I remember where I used to be terrified going to court. You know, we say about the butterflies in the stomach, and it was nerve-wracking. And then it's almost like when you learn to drive, you know, where initially you're sort of sweating when you're going through traffic lights and being really conscious about changing gear. And then like suddenly one day you realize you've driven somewhere without realizing you got there and you've managed to make a sandwich on the way. And that is very similar to advocacy. All of a sudden, one day you go, hang on a second, why did I ever find this tricky or difficult? That's not to say that there aren't individual cases you'll sometimes feel nervous about just because of the nature of the case. But in terms of, you'll just get familiar, you'll realize judges are human. I mean, and this ties back to what people have been saying about don't be too much like, you know, a barrister. Don't sort of do all the millions and use the flowery language and do it like TV. You are building a rapport, whether it's with a judge or a jury or your opponent, and very much in terms of when you're dealing with the witnesses. And realistically, that is just something that comes with experience, I think. I mean, I don't know if there are any shortcuts.
No. The fear does go. I mean, it takes a long time. I mean, I've never liked public speaking in outside of a courtroom. But once you get into a courtroom, you just suddenly come alive. It's a strange feeling.
Yeah,
I think. Sorry. I think for me, when I started out, a lot of the nerves was the unknown. I didn't know what the judge was going to be like, or in those days, the magistrates. I wasn't quite sure where I was supposed to be standing or what I was supposed to be saying, how I was supposed to address the tribunal. And I found that by going along and watching and just sitting and listening to what people said and how they said it and what they did, that took away some of the mystery for me. And so if I had a hearing at 10 o'clock, I always made sure that I was there when the court started so I could see what the magistrates were like. I had an idea, I chatted to people. And so that helped. And the other thing that made me nervous was, what if I did something wrong? You know, I suppose it's the school headmaster type thing, or the teacher. You're going to get shouted at. Well, as Kadeem said, and Alan, after you've been shouted at by judges a number of times, it doesn't get easier, but you get less stressed about it. And so I think that it's that preparation which certainly helps my nerves. I don't know about anybody else.
I can jump in just in terms of a sort of more practical perspective, in terms of, obviously experience definitely comes with it, and making sure you know your case definitely comes into it. But once you're actually in the courtroom or about to go in, and if you're still feeling nervous, I find it's quite helpful to sort of ground myself in things other than the case and my own preparation. So rather than looking at your notes for the last, 5-10 minutes before you're going in and sort of obsessing over what I've written, at that point, there's nothing else you can really add. So instead, thinking about either talking to your client and trying to distract them, or just even getting to grips with the building and looking around, things like that, that just slightly take you away from the sort of focus on the nerves, because as everyone said, it is something that you will deal with, and with experience and practice it gets better. But while you're in the middle of it, it's good to just try and keep your mind focused somewhere else, just to give you a bit of a break away from it. And yeah, it just stops you from stressing as much. You'll still be nervous and stressed, but it gives you a tiny bit of respite from it. And then once you're actually in the middle of a case, hopefully you should be busy thinking about the arguments that are being made by others. And so you won't have the time for the same nerves. It's the run up usually that I think is the heart of it. So hopefully that's sort of vague, practical bit of advice there.
Yeah, some great points raised there. And I think the key thing really is to think, why are you nervous? So I think with a lot of people, it's a fear of failure, as was sort of touched upon before. And quite often this can come from worrying that you're not going to be right. And it's a natural thing to happen. But the reality is, if you've put the preparation in, if you've read the law, you've read the cases, you know it inside out, then you know that all you can do is really present that argument in court. So if you've done the preparation, there shouldn't really be that worry there. And the other thing is, quite often you can look at more experienced advocates and think, well, I'm never going to get to that level. But the only reason that they're better than you is because of that experience. And it just takes time to build up to that. You'll build that experience in time and you'll get there. So it takes time. The nerves are never going to go away. And as the point's been raised, those nerves are actually, when you learn to do it properly, can be used as adrenaline to actually fuel your presentation in court.